Hello, everyone. I was told to wait just a few seconds so everybody can click join. So I'm going to fill this with fluff. No, I'm kidding. Okay, welcome to the 2021 European E-commerce Report webinar launch. This is several times that we've done this one, but this one I think is just so special. We've got some great people on here. So I'm going to go ahead and start introducing. My name is Sarah Lone. I'm sure you've seen me before. I work on the European Report. I work at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences within the Center for Market Insights, and we executed the report this year. So I'm happy to be here with these guys. Great. Okay, so first up, our reoccurring sponsors, we've got Luca Cassetti, who is our Secretary General for E-commerce Europe. And we've got Jean-Albert Nissin, hopefully I said that right, Chief Economist at Eurocommerce. And our fantastic panelist extra that we've got today, the illustrious Elise Cachin, hopefully I did say that right, who is the EU Public Affairs Leader for IKEA Retail. Everybody knows IKEA after COVID-19. So, okay, I'm going to give a little presentation on the figures from the European report. Then we're going to have the panelists give their viewpoints on that, little presentations. And then we're going to have some questions for the panelists. And if you've got some questions, you can pop them in the chat and we'll hopefully have a chance to get to those. Okay, we're going to begin. Before we do, I just want to say thanks. I wrote this down. Special thanks to all the associations, the National E-commerce Associations, and all the report partners who helped us with this report. We've been working on it since February, and that's a heck of a job. So thank you, all the folks along the way. And also everyone who's given the report its lasting legacy. So thanks to E-commerce Foundation and Internet Retailing, of course, for having done this report in the past and making it what it is today, being a part of that journey. So, okay, enough of that. I'm going to go on. Let's see if this works. Yes, this is the presentation. If you have questions on the university or the CMI, you can contact me. It's a great university in Amsterdam. That's it. Okay, so for countries included in the report, we've got 37 countries this year. We got the EU 27 highlighted in green, you'll see, and then we've got some extras, which is really cool. We included Russia this year, which is something we didn't do last year. And of course, the UK is no longer green as it's not in that EU 27. Okay, and then we've got our regions. So these regions are separated for the report specifically. Trading partners, lots of interesting things go into coming up with regions for e-commerce players. If you have questions, you can ask me, but going forward, when you see regions, this is what we're talking about. So if you spot your country, which region it's in, you can keep an eye on that. Okay, great. So first up, I'm going to talk about infrastructure and internet. 5G, obviously, right? This is a big slide. This is in the report. So if you don't see everything, that's okay. The top points to take away are where the arrows are. The Logistics Performance Index for 2018, excuse me, is still Germany, Sweden, and Belgium in the top places. For ease of, actually the top 4 are in Europe for Logistics Performance Index. If you don't know, these are indices that we use to measure e-commerce markets and to see how they're doing, what the infrastructure is like. These are global indexes, so indices actually. So you can see that Europe ranks quite high in all of them, which is great news. In the ease of doing business, Denmark is number 4. They're really leading the pack. Inclusive internet's an interesting one. Sweden and Spain are in the top. Let's see. Maybe the more important thing to say is that for this year, I added 2 new ones, and that's down at the bottom. You see Environmental Performance Index and the Global Cybersecurity Index. Sustainability is the word of the, I don't know, decade, century, our species. So we have to talk about it, and I think it's important to include it in the report. You can see where the countries lie with that. And actually, you can see Denmark is number 1. So that's an interesting point. Anyway, you can have a look at this in the light version of the report. And we're going to move on. Maybe we'll come back to it later. Who knows? Okay, this is an easy one. The digital tech savvy of all the folks in Europe. So the first one on the bottom, I don't know what this would be for you, left, is the EU 37. So this is the 37 countries within the EU. So in 2020, we saw that 89% were using the internet. And in the EU 27, which we had a special focus on as a side piece, also 89%. So they're really staying neck and neck with each other for internet use in 2020. And as you can see by region, Northern Europe is still a leader. That's been the case for many, many years. But Western Europe is coming up, so we'll see how that goes. And then e-shoppers. So we've got e-shoppers in Europe. That's the European, all the 37 countries again, and then the EU 27. You can see that the EU 27 is just a smidge above. My analysis would actually say that I think the UK is the main reason why the e-shoppers in Europe as a whole look a little bit higher. If you were to remove the UK, it might be a little different. If the UK was in the EU 27, that might be a little different. And as you can see, in Eastern Europe, we've got a little bit of a lower e-shopper rate. There's a lot of factors that affect that, and we'll get into that shortly. Okay, let's see. What do I have next? Oh, yeah. Okay, so e-shoppers per country. As you can see, the top 9, apart from Switzerland, are all in Western and in Northern Europe. So that sort of meshes well with the data that you just saw, which is e-shoppers and internet use. But this is, if you've ever joined a webinar, all stuff you've seen before. So I have a poll for you, actually. This is something new that hopefully I'm good at. I'm going to add this poll. Okay, here we go. Share now. Let's hope that works. Somebody will tell me. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the question is, which sellers did most consumers in the EU 27 purchase from during 2020? And I would love to hear if our panelists have an idea on this. I don't know if you have some thoughts on who you think.
I can maybe start, if you don't mind, Sarah. Thanks a lot for the introduction, and thanks a lot for putting together this report. It's absolutely great. I would say from national sellers. So that would be my first, my first guess. I would say mostly due to the pandemic. But you will tell me if I am right or not.
That's true, I will. Elise, Jean-Albert, do you have any ideas? What you think?
Maybe online platforms, because, you know, they have everything at one place, and the pandemic made people very eager to get convenience. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, I will align with my colleagues. I think the one thing I would add to that is it also very much depends on the presence of these international players in your country or not. I mean, I'm Belgian, so I know we shop a lot abroad from not national sellers. Unfortunately, we'd like to see more national selling as well.
That's true. Yeah, it's an interesting one. How islands or landlocked nations are more likely to shop from abroad. Okay, so we got 55% of the audience. I'm gonna show you the answers. Many of you were right. Let's see it. Ta-da! Okay, so everybody was sort of right, actually. It's mostly national sellers. And interestingly enough, I wanted to bring your attention to Retail Excellence is an e-commerce association in Ireland, and I interviewed Duncan this year, and he told me actually that buying local had become quite a trend during the pandemic. And in the report, we have all these interviews with all the e-commerce associations. You can read some more about information like that. But it really could be the case that in 2020, you saw more folks buying locally for this very reason, for the same reason that he had. Okay, I don't know how to exit that poll. I'm just going to leave it there for you, and you can fix it later. Okay, so next up in this section, I have some money issues. This is the money slides, as I like to call them, shining a light on money. Everybody screenshot it, right? This is for all of the European 37. This is the B2C e-commerce turnover. To get this figure, so you know, we work with all of the national e-commerce associations and report partners. It's lots of cooks in the kitchen that we put all together, and we come up with this figure from all of their individual research, which is fantastic. As you can see, in 2020, we still had a growth rate. 757 billion euros in turnover. And the growth rate, this is the rate of growth. So this isn't the amount that it grew. You might think that would be higher, but this is the rate at which we are growing, which we're still continuing to grow in Europe in double digits, actually. So that's good news. And the eGDP up in that corner, I wanted to show you the share of the GDP that is made up by e-commerce turnover. So it's actually pretty high. And interestingly enough, you'll know for 2020, of course, it was 4.29%. For the EU 27, it was a little bit lower. It was 3.62%. So that's, I think, maybe an interesting piece for each now. Of course, for the EU 27, it's a little bit lower, 463 billion. So, okay, let's do regions. You can see that Western Europe takes the largest share of this turnover, 64% in 2020, followed by Southern Europe. it just tracks with all the data, right? Internet use is really high. E-shopper use is really high. These markets are highly mature. That's pretty typical. But you do see really high growth rates in Eastern Europe. And on the eGDP graph, maybe it's a little bit confusing. You can see on Eastern Europe, GR, that's the growth rate for the year of 2020. It's 36%. And in Central Europe, it's 28%. In Southern Europe, it's 24%. But you'll notice that in Western and in Northern Europe, it's just 4 and 3% respectively. So you can see that the rate of growth for Western and Northern Europe, although they have the largest chunk, well, Western Europe has the largest chunk, the rate of growth is slowing down a little bit. Okay, this is a lot of data. Sorry for that. I decided to include B2C turnover by country. The UK is obviously typically number one. This is for 2020, so 236 billion, followed by France, powerhouse, and Germany, powerhouse, then Spain. And interestingly, Russia at 32.9 billion. So something interesting to note. And then for the growth rates, as I said a minute ago, you noticed in Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe, we saw more growth rates. You can see that realized here in this graph, the middle one, where Greece with a growth rate of 77%, Moldova, Russia, North Macedonia, Hungary, Poland, these are all really, their markets are growing extensively. Especially, I think, after COVID-19, more digitalization was put as a focus. And then eGDP by country. But you can see all this in the light report. And I'm going to run out of time. So next up, I'm going to talk about enterprises. So that's delivery, mobile apps, and chatbots. I have another poll for you. Wait, let me put this up. This is, what percentage of SMEs in the EU27 used an AI system in 2020? So you can answer that while I tell you about this. So we at the CMI, we measure companies and their use of technology. And so I thought this was an interesting graph to show you. You can see that large enterprises are over 5 times more likely to use machine learning, so big data analysis, and service robots, interestingly enough. We have our own little robot at the CMI, and her name's Pepper, and she talks to us. That's fun. And then and then also large enterprises are over 2 times more likely to have e-commerce sales. I thought that was also something interesting to note because we talk a lot about SMEs versus large enterprises. And for this is SMEs 10 to 249 persons employed. Of course, that leaves out the folks that have 1 to 9 persons employed, which are also smaller enterprises. But I thought this was interesting to include. So let's, oh, wait, I have to share it. There we go. All right, now you can answer the poll. So do any of our panelists have an idea for this question? What percentage of SMEs in the EU27 use SMEs, not large enterprises?
Because the crisis democratized those solutions, and you don't really have to do the full setup yourself. You can use an existing solution, which makes it much easier. So I would say quite a lot.
I would say, I don't know, 40%, 50%, but I agree with the reasoning of Elisa. It makes totally sense.
No, I think the use of these technologies is actually still quite low, frankly, and should increase massively in the coming years. If I'm not mistaken, it is obviously much bigger with the large companies. But I was surprised actually reading the report how low it still is. So there's a way to go, I think, both for the large companies and a fortiori also for the small ones.
Away a little bit, Jean-Albert, in a good way though, because you segued us well. 60% of the audience, it's actually super low. Only 6% use one AI system, and you can select on Eurostat to see for 2 or 3. It's still super low. You can see large enterprises though, it's 17%. So that's pretty. We have a lot of work to do, I think, for digitalization, right, Jean-Albert? We have a lot of work to do. Cool.
I agree. Yeah. I read the report.
First step. All right, cool. I'll speed it up a little. So for this year's report, we also included something totally new, which we're very proud of at the CMI. We did a web shop content analysis, which was incredibly long to do for us on the back end, but it was fun. It was good. So we took 30 of the most visited web shops in each European country, in all 37 of them, actually. to take a look at what they're doing, what they're offering on their website. What kind of payment methods, what kind of delivery methods, all that jazz. What are they really doing to give us some insight into the country's e-commerce markets? And this isn't leading by turnover, it's just web shops that get a lot of visitors. And we actually held to see for the different product categories and sectors what that, how that's different. So as you can see from the graph on the left, hopefully for you, the pickup point use for groceries is quite low, actually. Only 31% of the EU 27 that we looked at 37, which will be in a database, but this one is 27. Of the 27 European countries, only 31% of the grocery online stores were offering pickup points, which I thought was pretty low, especially after the pandemic. I imagine before that it was even lower, but it's still, I was a bit surprised to see that. Maybe you are as well. While for general merchandise, it's really high. So it could be that maybe general merchandise figured it out really early and said we need to have pickup points and collect in store. But then also you'll see that the use of delivery time options, next day delivery is available in 32% of those EU 27 leading web shops, leading by visitors. But what I wanted to highlight was the customers can choose the delivery date and time. I thought that was actually the most important one. Interesting that only 22% offer it. In the Netherlands, where I am, quite often they tell you the most sustainable option is delivering at this date and time. So maybe we'll come back to that. We'll talk about sustainability in relation to that. And then this is my last slide, and then I promise I'll stop talking. The use of mobile apps. As you can see, that if you've got 5 million or more visitors per year, well, we average that out, that you're way more likely, you're going to see retailers with a mobile app. So if you are one of those retailers with 50 million visitors or more, you might want to consider a mobile app, and maybe Elise can talk to us about that. I don't know. I know IKEA has an app. It's been used extensively in my home. And then also the use of mobile apps among web shops in the sector. Grocery really took off. I don't know if wherever you're tuning in from, if you have grocery, but we have Picnic in the Netherlands that really skyrocketed. There's so many different types. And then of course, fashion, shoes and accessories, general merchandise. But all this data is available in the light version of the report that you can check out. And we're also going to have an online dashboard eventually for this one. And the link for that is in the report as well. So you can play with the data yourself and see what you discover. Okay, that's it for me. I need to wrap this one up. How do I exit this? Wait, I have to press stop. Okay, great. I hope you all will join me back again. I have some questions for our panelists, but what I want to do first is hear from you and what your thoughts are on the report. What's your, anything you want to say, go for it. And I think, Luca, we started with you before. We'll keep it.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. And again, thanks to you and CMI for putting this report together. I mean, I can start, of course, with a brief reflection on the COVID impact, because I believe this report has never been more important than now. 2020 was a very special year, an exceptional year. And the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic put not only our lives, but also our economies on hold for quite some months. The year has been a little bit difficult for many people, for businesses, but if there is something positive that came from the pandemic is that it has also triggered some important changes. I have to say that most of these changes were probably already underway. We're actually convinced that some of them were really underway, but they have been further accelerated by the pandemic. The digital commerce sector stood particularly out last year. E-commerce has proven to be crucial for the continuation of not only economic activities, but also for the society in Europe. And as it can be seen in the report, in the increase of numbers of e-shoppers in Europe, consumers have more than ever turned to e-commerce, and that was to continue safely access products while their countries were implementing strict lockdown measures. Looking a little bit on the let's say at the future of the sector, of course, crucial here is the digital transformation. The past year has exposed the importance of the digital transformation of, I would say, the whole economy, not only on retail. And e-commerce in particular has proven to be exceptionally well placed to facilitate the digitalization of retail and create what we call a seamless shopping experience for consumers, or omnichannel, if you prefer. We have physical stores that opened up new online sales channels. We have SMEs that have been able to access new markets through the internet, merchants that have increasingly adopted omni-channel commerce solutions, and so on. So all this was done to accommodate the ever-changing health requirements of the different countries, often not coordinated at a European level, and also the ever-changing consumer needs. So I would say for sure that e-commerce Europe and its members see the future of retail becoming increasingly omni-channel, and the distinction between online and offline is fading away even faster now. Next to the digital transformation, of course, sustainability, the green transformation, that's of course going in parallel with the digital one, moving towards an increasingly sustainable digital commerce sector. This is also one of the priorities of e-commerce Europe. There were many great initiatives that have already been introduced by the sector in the coming years, and there is a lot of innovation in this sense, because businesses are really rethinking the way they produce as well, the way they exchange, and how and what they sell to consumers. So we see at e-commerce Europe the growth of e-commerce really as an opportunity to make a shift towards a more sustainable retail and also consumption practices, because of course there is a role to be played also by the consumer. More generally, we believe that there is an opportunity to really use the digitalization of the society to make this transition to a more sustainable economy. And the e-commerce sector has this potential to become a key driver for the circular economy. And I guess you will see that also in the various interviews that are included in the report this year. The rapid development of the e-commerce sector is constantly opening new opportunities for new sustainable practices, which as an association we fully support and encourage. And actually we also work together with our members to share best practices and learn from each other on how we can actually work towards an increasingly green digital commerce sector. And I'd like to conclude by mentioning our collaborative report if you're interested in this topic, because it contains a lot of this information and it's really available on our website. And I think my colleagues will also put a link in the chat if you're interested. Sorry, it was a little bit long, but that's what I wanted to say to start with.
Circular economy questions. In every interview with an association, I asked about this actually, because I thought this is the most important thing. Okay, cool. Shall we, Jean-Albert, would you like to, and then we'll save our fabulous Elise for last.
Sure, and going after Luca is always difficult because he says everything I wanted to say, kind of. So thanks for having me and us as Eurocommerce. We're obviously delighted to support this report once again. I want to thank you, Sarah, and your organization. And we know how difficult it is to assemble these kind of data. So this is also a way to just make sure we coherently source this kind of information data from the associations. As Eurocommerce, we're obviously represent retail and wholesale, including e-commerce. But as Luca already alluded to, we see this very much as a multi-channel or omni-channel play. So we represent the national associations in 28 countries, 5 million companies, 13 million employees, both in food and non-food, should you not know us. I want to start with an obvious one, but I mean, clearly e-commerce and digital has been critical for our companies to survive. Frankly, in the last years. In many cases, unfortunately, it's not been sufficient to compensate for lost sales in stores. And we also know that the impact has been massively different from one sector to the other, right? I mean, food retail has been doing well, home nesting and gardening, electronics have been doing well, apparel has been suffering very much. But so we need to be very nuanced on how we see this. But overall, clearly, e-commerce and digital has been a lifeline to many of our businesses. We see this, and I think the report, Sarah, when I saw the numbers, I was surprised, and we discussed this. The numbers, if I'm not mistaken, in the report also include travel and retail, which therefore seem a bit lower than what we see in the market. the market growth in commerce, except travel and retail, has been absolutely massive. So you could not win market share over the last year in any of these categories without investing massively in digital. So we see this as continuing. I mean, consumer habits have shifted. Consumers want it all. They want healthy products delivered fast and very conveniently and at a cheap price, which also is a danger for our sector, because we know we need to massively invest and accelerate investments, both front end and back end. And you alluded to chatbots, IA, automation of warehouses. So massive investments required in the sector. I think your numbers clearly show the importance. What we also should not forget, and I mentioned omnichannel, but it's the effect of e-commerce on store shopping. So research online, purchase offline. Obviously, there's also the opposite. There's a few nuggets, I would say, in the report, and you showed a few in your intro, Sarah, with technology and web shops. I think the one on delivery times also strikes me, and I was in another webinar actually yesterday where we discussed sustainability versus e-commerce. You also see these quick commerce companies coming up and delivering, or promising to deliver in 45 minutes or 15 minutes. I'm talking about the Gorillas or Cajoos or Wheezies in different parts of Europe. So that trend is also there, and we see many of the leading players, the traditional players, teaming up with delivery specialists. And so the ecosystem that a retailer needs to be able to compete in e-commerce is actually increasing. So a few final thoughts. I mean, we talk about twin transitions, and we obviously, as Eurocommerce, applaud the twin transitions. It's critical for a sector to digitalize faster. As I said, it requires massive investments. We talk about transformation. We think it's a fundamental transformation for a sector rather than a transition. And then I'd like to conclude with one word of real caution and attention on SMEs. I think you alluded to it, Sarah. We are representing, as our sector, 90% plus of our companies are SMEs. So when you think retail, everyone is thinking about the big players, but actually the vast majority are SMEs. And when the water goes back, or when support mechanisms stop, we see a big risk of a large percent of those companies actually suffering or being unable to continue business. So think about the impact on employment and on high streets. Those companies as well need to digitalize. We've seen how much they need to continue on that. So there's different measures that we want to support or want to push for them to go online, either directly or via marketplaces or via public-private initiatives. I mean, there's many of those going on, and the main call here, and I will get back to that, is we need a regulatory level playing field for different players in the sector to be able to compete. So overall, e-commerce provides fantastic convenience for consumers. We're convinced it's there to stay and to grow even more. You've seen some of the numbers in some kind of Eastern European countries. The numbers are still pretty low. They will continue to increase. Even the UK, which is far ahead, is actually accelerating very fast. But let's be cautious. It will require massive investments in infrastructure, in digital, in sustainability to thrive in the long run. So let me stop here. But yeah, thank you for the report again, and it's a great read.
Thank you for your comments too. You're right. If you search through the report, Google through the report. If you just word search through the report, you will see that level playing field is definitely mentioned. And so is this omni-channel. And also this idea that everybody wants to know, after COVID, really fully after, do people stop shopping online? And what we're seeing, even, I was chatting with the association in Serbia, no, people are going back to the store, but still shopping online, because once you start, you don't really stop, I guess, is the idea. Anyway, thank you so much, Jean-Albert. Elise, I think you have a presentation for us, so I'm going to totally give the floor to you, and go for it. Thank you.
Production, and thank you for Ecommerce Europe for having me today, and for all the great work around the report. So as you already know, my name is Elise Cachin, and I work as EU Public Affairs leader for Inca Group. Just before we dive in, very briefly, Inca Group is the largest IKEA franchisee, accounting for 90% of IKEA sales worldwide. But most relevant for today, we are present in 22 member states of the European Union through our retail operation, our investments, and our shopping centers. So now let's dive in the topic itself. So the main point we see over the last year is that COVID-19 pandemic forced us to transform faster. We were already transforming. That trend has been there for years. However, when 18 months ago, we see all our stores closing with 75% of our blue boxes closing down, suddenly everybody being home means that the demand for our products was actually increasing. So we really had to leapfrog our transformation and to really speed up the way we were transforming and becoming more digital. So what would have taken us a matter of years suddenly was done in only weeks. And that trend was really the start of everything for last year. And what is really interesting for us to share with you is that we strongly believe that some of these changes and trends are actually here to last, though the COVID-19 pandemic will hopefully soon come to an end. And we have two main trends that we think we are going to say. First of all, customers will look for deeper and more integrated omnichannel experiences. And second of all, sustainability will become even more centered to e-commerce and omnichannel retail in general. So if we quickly diving in those two trends, the first one is about accelerating and deepening omnichannel. So basically, it's that movement, as I said before, was already existing. But what we see changing is that initially, where we were more about bringing a bit of digital in our stores and optimizing the way we are operating, we are entering a second phase. So at the start, it's really about, for instance, bringing a digital display in the store, so you're able to try out your PAX wardrobe and see how you want to configure it. But it's also about, using digital tools, so you're able to be more clever about the way you manage your stock and so on. But it's also about now bringing that digital, that real life experience to our digital channels, whether it's our web shop or our app. As Sarah mentioned, we are large enough to have an app. And the main point there is, for instance, we acquired an augmented reality startup to beef up our competencies in the matter. So now you are able to use your IKEA app from the comfort of your home to try to visualize how your next sofa will fit in your lovely living room. And that's part of digitalization. And it's now omnichannel being accelerated means that we're bringing in those store-like experiences. So for us as a business, saying, e-commerce versus stores doesn't really make any sense. We see it as one continuous flow, and we see that continuing over time. And the second big trend for us is really about sustainability being at the center of our digital transformation. We do believe that being a good business is going beyond than just making money. It's really about putting, responsibility and trust in our core KPIs, and it's also what our customer expects. So in the end, being a good business is actually good business point blank. And what here we can say from an IKEA perspective is that we are committed to be climate positive and circular by 2030, meaning that our main goal is that to reduce more greenhouses gas that our entire value chain emits moving forward. And to do that, data and tech are essential to any advancement. For instance, they are a big reason of why we were able to record last year our first absolute drop in emissions, meaning that our greenhouse gases emission dropped by 4.3%, despite sales increasing by 6.5%. Here also, maybe to build upon Jean-Albert's point, the big question about how that the sales are increasing, but whether we're able to sustain and make money out of it is another question that obviously the COVID-19 crisis has challenged, but it's still very encouraging to see that decoupling happening. And a good example also is about how we are using our stores as fulfillment centers for our e-commerce operations. So here again, that idea of omni-channel going deeper, now we are able to fulfill some of our e-commerce orders in the stores next to you, our customers. So we're able to reduce our environmental footprint moving forward. So basically, that brings me to the end of those introductory remarks. So if I had to sum up, we said two big trends that were started by COVID-19, but that we strongly believe are here to stay. First, deeper omnichannel retail, and second of all, sustainability being at the center of everything that we do. And the one thing I want to let you with is the fact that in light of those new realities, we need policies that follow, meaning that take into account the fact that what we considered before as being the norm is not really it anymore, and that having that common overarching view between for omnichannel retail will be key moving forward. So that would be it for me, and thank you very much for listening.
Decrease, but sales increase. I actually, when I spoke to the Marc L'Olivier from FEVAD, the French E-commerce Association, he actually says in his interview, and I'm paraphrasing, that doing things more sustainably for a company is not, it actually creates better efficiency. You are more efficient the more sustainable that you can become. So the two really go hand in hand, you know, and I think that's really cool to see and to remember. I'm also curious, are you ever going to create an app for whether or not the item will fit in your vehicle before you leave the store? Because that's been a problem for me.
I can only invite you to look at the website. You have a section about the size of the pieces. So for now, it's still up to your creative minds to make it fit. But, you know, who knows, hopefully one day we'll be able to also use artificial intelligence for that.
So would my partner. Okay, so moving on. I have some questions for you. I have some from the audience, but I have one that I wanted to ask you, actually. We've all talked about it. You touched on it, a lot of you. So I'm going to ask all of you individually. So first up, digital transformation. In all of our fields, we're really seeing this and we're talking about it. And so I'm curious, you've all spoken a little bit about digital transformation, but can you give your thoughts on it, digital transformation throughout Europe, where you see it really happening, where it's going, what it means for digital trade, where we could do more, just generally really focus on digital transformation. And maybe Jean-Albert, let's start with you. How about that?
Wow, that's a vast question. Look, I'm not sure I can answer regional differences, but let me take a different angle on this. I mean, this is accelerating. This is there to stay. I mean, consumers want it, and it's actually good for business. Just to give you a number, we've run this research with McKinsey, and kind of leaders in digital transformation have outperformed. Well, not obviously not only in sales, but also in return to shareholders massively. I think the difference is as high as 20% in what is called TRS, so total return to shareholders. So that's one aspect. It's there to stay. Obviously, it's a bit recursive because, I mean, with the prizes, obviously those have been winning, but in the end, that's what it is. The second point is, let's not forget there's a front end and a back end dimension to this. There's a front end dimension that we see as consumers with all kind of new things popping up, and the delivery mechanisms and the quick commerce and and all these sites inventing new I mean, incredible innovation, and companies actually buying small and startups, etc., to accelerate that. That's great. I think what we often forget is the backend innovation and the backend digitalization that is actually required to actually fulfill this. So, I mean, warehouses, I mean, not many consumers visit warehouses, but if you have never visited an automated warehouse, well, try to visit one, or just Google automated warehouse, and you'll see on YouTube what it is. It's massively impressive. And so the digitalization of our warehouses is there as well. The digitalization of our logistics, transport is there as well. I mean, obviously the most innovative or forward-looking is this kind of automated robots delivering stuff at your home. We're not quite there, even though, I mean, it is there, but I mean, I don't see it, at least in my street yet, but it's also there. So I think again, it's massively important. It requires massive investments. I think the fear I have, and let me share that, is that it does. I mean, people underestimate how much investment it does take, and our sector is actually a relatively low margin business. So the big companies will still be able to invest, but many small and medium companies, when they have to go through that transformation, is actually daunting. Let me stop here. I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's I see it going forward, front end, back end, everywhere. If you don't do this, you will not survive.
And okay, so I asked this question first because there was a question from the audience that I'm gonna give it to Luca, and I'm gonna say, first, can you answer the question that I had? And then second, also we've got from Ed, on the one hand, massive investments are required. On the other hand, SMEs are encouraged to go digital. How can they afford the required investments and survive? So maybe, Luca, with your experience working with players directly in the field, you have some insights into that and can let us know where you see digital transformation going.
Try to address the question while trying to address also your questions, Sarah, at the same time. I don't know if it will make sense, but I will do my best. Maybe a little bit more in general on digital transformation. I mentioned it during my introduction. Elise mentioned it as well. John Albert also mentioned it. So, of course, with COVID, we have seen this acceleration of digital transformation. It involved also SMEs because many SMEs during the lockdown had to set up online shops if they wanted to stay alive, basically. They started to sell through new digital channels. They use platforms as well to maybe go online very quickly and in an easier way compared to setting up by yourself a whole e-commerce web shop. I mean, the digital transformation in general, I would say that it also led to some interesting developments. For example, little shops, and I'm talking about proximity shops, basically selling just to their neighborhood, found out that thanks to the internet, they also have a pool of consumers, abroad. I have always this example that was mentioned by one of our national associations of a cheese shop in Paris who started to sell to Belgium as well, because apparently Belgian consumers are also interested in that. So there is a lot of digital transformation that is happening, and all these developments are, of course, very positive, but as it was mentioned by this person in the audience, I forgot the name, I'm sorry, there are challenges indeed. The first challenge is with regards to policymakers, because the policymakers need to recognize that this transition is happening, and there is a consequent need for investments and for subsidies also from the member states and from the institutions. So to make sure that the sector is resilient and competitive, I guess that support and investment in digital solutions and also in digital skills or reskills is really important to ensure that all actors, in particular SMEs, can be part of the transformation. That goes together with the fact that at policy level, we see sometimes that online and offline are treated in a different way, which is something very worrying in our opinion. So that doesn't help ultimately these companies that are in the process of transforming in a digital and also sustainable way. So as Elise said, policy should follow the developments that are happening in the retail world, and until that is not happening, it's going to be challenging for all these players to to be resilient and to actually succeed. So yeah, I don't know if it answers the questions, but I think that's how I would try to address them.
The direct question that Ed is asking, really, how can they afford the required investments, is a hard one for all of us to answer, right? Because I think it depends on your certain situation. It really depends on a retailer's situation and where they are, and yeah. But no, thank you. That's great. And I think, as you said, Elise, she's got some opinions on this. I imagine you have some experience with digital transformation. So and you said you're active in 22 European countries, I think you said, right? 22 member states.
If we go for full Europe. But when it comes to digital transformation, first, it's really about that seamless integration of real life experiences with digital ecosystems. It's from a retailer perspective, we don't see them as separate. We integrate them in everything we do, from as Jean-Albert was saying, really operational standpoint, whether it's warehouses, how do you manage your stock, to how do you serve your customer experience. So for instance, we are launching in hopefully by the end of the social in at least hundreds of our stores, a new solution called Shop and Go, where you can use your IKEA app to scan through the products when you go, you go in the store. So you scan them, put them in your bag, and then you go to self-checkout, generate a QR code so you're able to pay faster. And that is the type of experiences that we see. And from a policy perspective, it's really important to acknowledge that. Obviously, another big trend we see for the digital transformation of the sector is that retailers and wholesalers will become ever more data-driven. Data is key to be performing, whether it's financially or even more sustainably speaking. It's about project data, about consumer data, also about financial data. And it doesn't only help us to make better decisions and anticipate what we need, but it also helps us to be greener and to be more efficient at what we do by being able to accurately predict what will be our stock needs, that type of things. And last but not least, the key point for policymakers in our from our standpoint is that digitalization is driven by innovation, which means that from a policy standpoint, it's really important to focus on the outcome we want to achieve as Europeans rather than regulating the tech itself, because we don't know for how long it will be that solution that we're currently using will stand for. Maybe in 2 years, we'll have a breakthrough innovation, and it's the nature of this process. So really for us, focusing on what we want to achieve and where we want Europe to be is really important from a policy-making standpoint.
I think, so sticking with this digital transformation, right, because you talked now, Elise, about some transformative, really innovative things that you're doing at IKEA, right, or Inca Group, I should say maybe. But sticking with this, we got a question also from the audience from Roisin, and I think I'm going to pitch this one to Luca so that you're already aware. The challenge for SMEs is the cost to acquire and implement tech such as automation, AI, blockchain, etc. Will this ultimately empower the larger players as they are able to satisfy consumer demands in various ways and push out SMEs? And first I'm going to ask Luca, and then maybe Jean-Albert, you can also give a perspective on this too.
First of all, I guess that SMEs are normally, I would say, users of AI blockchain solutions rather than producers of their own solutions. And of course, big players have indeed the power, the resources to create their own solutions. And these solutions can be made accessible to SMEs as well. But of course, there is a cost for that. I think it depends also a little bit on the consumers, and also, their different ways consumer actually consume products and services. So I don't think that SMEs will be completely pushed out of the market, not at all, by large players. It was mentioned before, the level playing field argument that was a recurrent theme in our report. This is, of course, also a recurrent theme in e-commerce Europe and its work. So, yeah, I mean, SMEs are the backbone of the European economy. I think Jean-Albert mentioned that before as well. So I don't see how they would be pushed out of the market by larger players. I see in the platform economy, of course, a cooperation between SMEs and larger platforms. As I said before, SMEs used platforms to be able to go online very quickly in an easy way. Of course, there is a cost for that, but it's, of course, there is also a cost of complying with all the regulations in the European Union. So until we don't have, a fully harmonized and predictable legal framework, then it becomes a bit complicated also for SMEs to develop their own sales channels rather than relying on other players' infrastructures. I would try to address it like this.
As well.
Yeah, look, I think there's no fatality here, well, back to basics. The first thing is for SMEs to know their consumers and have great products. And if they have these great products or services, actually with digital, the market is much bigger. And I think Luca alluded to that before with the French cheese example, than before. Now, then obviously the other question is, well, how much of a store do you need, and the impact of the high street? I think that one is not to underestimate. I think in terms of having access to digital tools, there's massive availability of digital tools to digitalize SMEs. I mean, the Shopifys, the marketplaces, the Google itself and Google Analytics. So I think there's massive people out there trying to make business helping SMEs to digitalize, and they're doing very well. Now the question then becomes the skilling of the SMEs, and I'm also thinking about the small independent shop owner. What does he or she need to do to master these skills and build her own website with Wix or with whatever it is, being able to use the available services, and many of the SME owners are actually not, need upskilling to master those tools. But tools are out there, and there's also public kind of initiatives out there to help them. So I think it's massively a question of reskilling and having the time to look at those things, learn them. And it's a different world, right? I mean, it's not kind of arranging your store. It's actually being able to understand who is coming to your website and how to retarget them on social media, etc. It's a different game altogether.
Where you are,
but it's out there.
The story is just different. Every time you open a new, let's say, cross-border, if you go somewhere else, it's a different story. I have a question actually for Elise. Now I want to share, I'm going to brag for 2 seconds. When we did our content analysis for the web shops this year, which thanks to Nahid and Yessa, part of my team, our team, we collected data on corporate social responsibility, and we left a very vague definition of this. This was just if you mentioned anything from anti-slavery to sustainability, circular, if you had a CO2 offset button, whether we could talk for days about greenwashing and all these things, but we just thought, okay, who is just saying something about sustainability? That's what we looked at. And as you can see, again, sort of like with the mobile apps, once you get 50 million visitors plus, you see a lot more of this. So my question for Elise, in light of this data, what role do you think communication of sustainability efforts plays in relation to conversion and turnover in e-commerce? And you probably have some experience. Obviously, IKEA has been a big proponent of sustainability, as you said earlier. And the secondary question is, what are some of your takeaways from these results in particular as it relates to e-commerce and sustainability? And how does data really help with the economic transformation towards more sustainable processes? I realize that's a lot of questions. Go for it.
Thank you. That's indeed a tall order. So I'll do my best to address all these points. So I guess going back to the basics, it's what I said before. We do strongly believe that being a good business is actually good business. We see that being value driven is really important for customers, especially if you take into account millennials. So those numbers to me are not surprising at all. They are just showing what will be the trend of the future, as we have customers that are more and more sustainability minded and see it as a key driver of their basically buying and retail habits. So that would be for the first point. And the second point about how do we deal with data and what do you see as being important? So first of all, we approach sustainability from a holistic perspective at IKEA, meaning we have a green thread in everything we do. It's not really specific to e-commerce or what I prefer to say, omni-channel retail. It's also about how do you operate and how do you handle everything in your business. So from that standpoint, it's really a key driver of what we do rather than something you try to incorporate. I think it goes hand in hand with the way you digitalize your business. And last but not least, about data. So as we said earlier, data is essential as much as tech actually to get any advancements in sustainability. So here we can, a few maybe more concrete examples of what we can do once the data is in place and you're able to analyze it. A good example is about, for instance, delivery routes for your e-commerce orders. So you mentioned a bit earlier that in the Netherlands where you live, Sarah, you're being told, the best delivery time would be at that point during your day because it would be more sustainable. It's basically because companies like IKEA are using artificial intelligence and algorithm to compute what would be the most efficient routes for deliveries to reduce emissions. Another good example would be also about forecasting demand. So we are using AI and machine learning to try to anticipate the best how much product we will need. And by doing so, we're able to obviously improve our bottom line, but also to reduce our environmental footprint by preventing any over-ordering or need to reorder something, creating new transport and so on.
That's great.
So it's in the nutshell what I would bring forward to answer your questions. I hope it's covered the total order.
And I'm going to start with Elise, then Jean-Albert, then Luca to finish us off here. So COVID's impact, this is a big topic. COVID's impact on e-commerce has been studied through lots of different lenses. But the fact that the sector needs investment in all different ways is abundantly clear. So my question for you in, I don't know, a minute or less, what are your suggestions to policymakers and retailers for the future of digital trade and the investments in the coming years? So particularly thinking digital trade investments, what are your suggestions to, because we talk a lot about how policymakers and retailers, but what are your concrete suggestions for them? And we'll start with Elise, your perspective on that, then Jean-Albert, then Luca.
So the first one that will be the driving force would be stop proposing online and offline. We hear often, what is illegal online should be legal offline. From a business perspective, it's not concrete, it's just business. So that would be my first recommendation. And the second one is really to focus on the outcomes we want to achieve as a society rather than the tools we take to get there. We used to get that. So if we say we want transparency, we want people to have ownership of their data, we should not regulate how we get there, but just to make sure that those basic principles, which are super important for society and businesses, are achieved. So that would be my two biggest ones.
So I think, first of all, we are retail, and so we are the route to the consumer. We are the sector best able to nudge the consumer choices. And we are massively intertwined with other ecosystems. The Commission has this approach about ecosystems. So So I think that let's not underestimate the importance of our sector in kind of influencing choice and impacting other ecosystems. I think about transport, I think about energy. And so in that sense, let's not underestimate the massive investment required, or the spillover effect that investment can have in retail. I mentioned the level of investment required already. Let me not belabor this. It's massive. It's not a transition, it's a transformation. SMEs, I mentioned already, big attention for us to SMEs, which is still 90% of our companies. And then, well, I alluded to this, but it's the level playing field that's really important, right? And indeed, as Elise said, not making the difference between e-commerce and stores. We are in an omni-channel world, but having also a level playing field with foreign players. And then, I mean, one aspect is still kind of some restrictions that are put on our right to sell products by some of the producing companies. So the right to addressing online restrictions of selling, I think, is another important element.
Couple of points also from my side. Of course, we need to ensure that SMEs get the necessary government support and resources to be able to go online. So that's crucial. And that entails improving digital skills and developing knowledge on marketing, customer service, payments, e-logistics. So everything that is needed to be successful online as well as offline in a combination, omni-channel. We mentioned it many times today. At policy level, really to help merchants across Europe, and I would like to echo what Elise and Jean-Albert already said, we really need to make sure that rules are harmonized as much as possible at European level. This is really the biggest barrier when a business would like to go cross-border, especially if they are SMEs, the lack of full harmonization. They have to be channel neutral. That's, of course, crucial. Elise also mentioned it. It's really important. And they have to be properly enforced and enforceable. And I would like to reconnect to what Jean-Albert said. It's good to make, very thorough EU regulations, but if then you are not able to enforce them against players coming from outside Europe, then we are a little bit missing the point, And I think it's really important that we have this kind of level playing field so that everybody can compete on the same level, either if they come from the EU or not. So I think these would be my last key points, without forgetting, of course, the role that also national associations can play, not only the members of e-commerce Europe, but I guess also the members of Eurocommerce do the same. They all identify a lack of digital skills and knowledge as an important issue. And many of these associations are running programs, and they did that during COVID. They were doing it also before COVID. Really programs to reskill and to bring the needed digital skills to be able to be successful online.
It's not a transition, it's a transformation.
I would conclude like that.
I think that succinctly really sums it up. Thank you for that, Jean-Albert. Thank you so much, e-commerce Europe, Luca, Eurocommerce, Jean-Albert. Thank you so much, Elise, for joining us today. It was really great. Thanks so much also for sponsoring the report again, and I hope you check it out. The light version, I think Nicola just uploaded, which is great. Take a look at that. If you have any questions on it, feel free to email me. My email's at the end. I'm happy to discuss. If you want to know anything about that, university. Thank you so much to the National E-commerce Associations and report partners, of course, also, because if it weren't for you, this literally wouldn't be possible. I don't have all the knowledge of all the different countries to know these things, so I need your expertise. And don't forget, in about a month, we're going to publish an interactive dashboard with the data from our content analysis. And maybe I can rope Luca and Jean-Albert and Elise into doing another webinar or something where we launch that. It's going to be a really cool way to play with data and see where your country or your region is. So I'm excited about that. It's very unique data. It's not ever been used before, so that'll be cool. So keep an eye out for that. And I think that's it. I don't know how to exit this webinar. I'm going to hopefully click the right button. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And thank you to our panelists. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And thanks to the audience.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.